let's do this. World War II. So I think I might try to make a Zoom poll here. You guys can just chime in if you want. I'm curious how many, what percentage of this did you read? Because I didn't have enough time to go back through yet and like copy and edit it down and change it. I would love to. I haven't been able to do that yet. So I'm hoping as you guys have like kind of come, wandered through here a little bit, you've been able to see a few things. Oh yeah, those are like some leftovers I have to clean up. You can tell like, oh, okay, like the Holocaust. Okay, yeah, this is going to be important. I should probably pay attention to everything in here, even though you don't want to. Every impulse in you is going to be, don't read any of this. That's why it's all in red. That's why I've got everything in red right there. I will just tell you now, watch this video. I love this man. It's a fantastic video. And we'll watch another one of his videos on, what is it, December 3rd, our last day. We'll watch another video then. This stuff though, like the war. So this is tons of detail about the war and how it expands. Maybe not like the most important thing in the world to get all of these details for this class. But I would try to pay attention to maybe like as you're scanning through here and scanning through things, maybe like realize, okay, the Middle East keeps coming up and it's going to be more problems down in the future. So yeah, read that.
Like of now.
Yeah, right. Exactly. This one's a huge one, but like, this is not like something, this is more like talking about like kind of the history between Germany and Russia. It's a little bit more just in depth background. So, yeah, I won't. Ooh, there's an echo there. I won't try to go like in crazy detail on like questions from the World War II section because I know it's too much stuff to have read through. But I'm curious, who in here like you're like, well, I think I probably read it like through about 50% of it at least. You were hitting half. Anybody? You can be honest with me. It won't hurt my feelings. No, I didn't. Do I hear 40%? Anybody 40%? 35. Do I hear 30? Anybody read anything? Damn it. Oh.
Like I got to the Cheerios part.
Okay. All right. Well, that's, you got in there at
I
least.
was like, honestly, I was gonna go through all of it like this weekend.
I mean, if you're into World War II, I think you'll really enjoy most of this. It's very like, and like, obviously, these things are not about World War II. Like, Citizen Kane, but like, don't skip that, right? That's number one on AFI, the American Film Institute's all-time important American movies ever made. So you don't have to watch the movie. I think you should. But like, if you wanted to hear Orson Welles talk about Citizen Kane, this is an 11-minute interview from 1960. Some of this stuff, this is why it's like, well, I don't know what to cut. This, like, okay, there's German submarine attacks on the East Coast and Japanese submarine attacks on the West Coast. We don't really ever talk about that. And then if you look at this thing right here, can I zoom in on that? I should get a bigger picture. Blackout kit. Here, let me go over to this. All right. Wait, no, that's not right. That's not what I want. Okay.
I can touch something that's illegible.
Yeah, this is like, look, you can get a little glow in the dark kit for when the Nazi submarines come and they're shooting at your cities and you have to turn all the lights off so you don't all die from like the Nazis. Here's a little glow in the dark kit to play with some games. It's made out of uranium.
Wait, they actually was selling that?
Oh yeah, for reals. Like straight up like nuclear active. They're like, it's such a low dose that it's not going to be harmful to I'm not joking. So it's like, well, that's not I'm not gonna test anybody on that. There's not gonna be a question on that, like on the third test. But those are kind of fun things to find out about. You're like, wait, what? That's a real thing. Oh my gosh. And the history of like comic books being, mixed in here. Um,
That'd be funny if if that they were selling that kit in 2020 and then 2021 you see an info commercial like, have you bought that kit? And like you can call the lawyer to like sue because you
you may
got
be entitled to settlement.
from your kid playing with the uranium kit. I don't know. That's just funny.
Oh my gosh, I know. It's funny and like ridiculous and terrifying.
Okay,
Oh,
so the lights of Los Angeles, can you explain more of that? Because it was really brief.
the what?
The lights. You had something about like the lights of Los Angeles or the war or the something
Oh
about
yeah.
the
Yeah. The yeah, let me go back up here then. It wasn't the dark out kit, right? It wasn't this thing.
no, it was the man, I must have been I was gonna Google it, but then I don't know, I got distracted scrolling down. But
Oh, like artificial or like alien lights?
yeah, though that one you had put it in, it's like in your Satori at I think at the
I
top
think it
is
is in here somewhere. Yeah, I mean, like, I like including that stuff, especially when uh there's like people from the government saying it, right? Like when it's, when you've got like a NASA astronaut saying he saw something in outer space, it's like, okay, well, that's not like some homeless dude in front of 7-Eleven or a farmer in Oklahoma. like you have to be like a genius to be an astronaut and like go through all kinds of hoops and stuff. So I'm not saying I believe in aliens or that aliens exist or anything. I'm just saying like, well, that's interesting. I don't mind including that information because it piques my curiosity. Um, Again, this kind of stuff about oil and colonialism. I'll have a question about maybe that, but it's not going to be a like you're not going to have to know. Wait, the Dutch East Indies, Indonesia, but who had Malaysia? Okay, that was the British and the French. Like you don't have to know that for a question like this. It would be like maybe just saying like, hey, which of these like you know colonial powers of the 20th century waged war to get oil in the 1930s and 40s. A, Japan. B, England. C, France. D, Germany. E, the Soviet Union. F, the United States. G, all of the above. It probably wouldn't be that many, but that one would be an all of the above question, right? Like, oh, everybody's just kind of running for oil because if you run out of oil, the war is over. That's what I want you to take like the big takeaway from that. The big takeaway about how much bombing takes place during World War II. I want you to know what the Manhattan Project is. Like, that's one of those things that you should know about. This is a little bit more techie on like some of the history behind the war and okay, let's see here. Yeah, so a lot of stuff on tech like rockets and rocket fuel and you don't need to like you wouldn't need to watch this video necessarily unless you want to see color footage of like Nazi rockets from World War II, which again, I find pretty interesting. It's like, oh, geez. So they're basically the guys that invented like aerospace travel, right? Like rocketry. Yeah, yeah. Werner von Braun is like the head of this. V2, the V2 rockets killed thousands of people in Britain and they just launched them from across the sea. Like you can actually still go to France and part of I think Denmark? It's, like, kinda far it's I think it's, like, an island right off of, like, the main part of Denmark, and they've got, like, these giant cement they look like giant cement monorail tracks, huge, though, and it's, like, what they launched the rockets off of, and we're trying to control them with these really, really early primitive, like, gyroscopes and, like, the thing that, like, makes you turn your phone and it moves it? That's what they're kind of invented in order to try to fly a flying bomb is what they call Can you imagine the terror of people living in Britain? We all know rockets exist and missiles are a thing. Everybody knows that. We've been used to that for, like, 80 years. They didn't know about that in 1939, 40, like, did and then, at the end of the war we rush in to grab the head of the um Werner von Braun, the head of the like V2 rocket program, like a top ranking Nazi, friends with Hitler, and hire him to, come work at NASA, set him up with like a kind of cleaner background and put him to work trying to beat the Russians into outer space because they got some of the Nazi scientists too. So again, here's some more like in-depth detail about like the progress of the war. I'm going to be looking for general understandings. So not that um you know the Solomon Islands and Guadalcanal and this happened before this or that it was midway and then the Iwo Jima like I that's not necessarily like information you need to retain, particularly for this class, but to know maybe the way the war went down, right? So watching, but probably both of those um, oversimplified videos, right? They usually give you pretty good, kind of understandable approach to the breakdown of how this stuff happens. The in the Pacific, like what's important is to understand this kind of idea of island hopping. So where instead of taking every island that Japan has, it's like, well, we'll take this one, and then we'll sail all the way around four of these and take this one and then this one. And then all of these islands, they're all just screwed. They don't even have supplies. Like that's and that's one of the reasons why, like, you've got reports like in the 1960s of people landing on some little tiny island out in like the South Pacific and like some crazy looking like older Japanese soldiers dropping out of a palm tree to kill them. Like they've been there for years. They don't know the war's over. Nobody came and got them. Like there were just like Japanese kind of scattered everywhere. So just knowing like, okay, that's kind of the approach of beating Japan over there and like making our way closer to Tokyo, um, and getting within range of like bombing, by the end of the war. That's that. Like, if you know that, if you kind of understand, like, oh, okay, this is how things played out, and you get a little familiar with that geography, right? Um, that would be something worth knowing. Yeah, all of this stuff in here, important things, but you don't. I'm not going to quiz you on this. I'm not going to quiz you on like the assassination plots on Hitler, or the German spies that get arrested in New York City. I'm not. I want. There won't be a quiz on that. I'm not going to talk about. All right, scratch that. There might be a question about the Roman Catholic Church and the Holocaust on there. Just a heads up. Um, And this, if you don't know this term, um, make yourself familiar with it. This is like the collaborators. This is like the half of France. So Germany invades, and they basically take all of this and the entire coastline. And then they leave this little part of southern France as like a fake France that's under German control. But the Nazis like run the state essentially, and so um, they they willingly ship out Jews to the Holocaust. This is something you should know, not just for my test, but for kind of culture in life. So if somebody refers to, you're working at a corporate business one day and there's like a kind of hostile shift or takeover in the leadership, and somebody's like, oh, it's a Vichy regime right now. You'll know what that means. Like that's a thing that people would say and have some kind of cultural context for. Um, the same way, like you need to know who Winston Churchill is. Be for just familiar with him. I'm not gonna like get into the the grainy details of some of this stuff, but you know, uh, I'm gonna make this red. Know that the Pentagon is started here, and know that it is gigantic. Um, in terms of like Russia, don't know what to cut here. I will say this: um, uh, the Battle of Stalingrad's like it's pretty key. It's kind of key to winning the war, and uh, yeah, just know this. Know that that is like a turning point. This is kind of interesting. It's the largest tank battle that's ever been fought and ever will be fought. Like we're not really tanks aren't really the thing anymore. Um, the conferences, as you can see, Joseph Stalin, Uncle Joe, as Franklin Roosevelt liked to call him, which is weird, right? Weird to think about. Roosevelt, who's looking pretty, he's looking aged by this point, and then Winston Churchill, who's just a sourpuss and waiting for his martini. This is more on like the Holocaust. So if this is like in-depth things about the Holocaust, but as you guys are making notes, you'll have like the big things in there. What's really important and what's not, critical. Um, yeah, be familiar with this one, the B-29. I'll put a question in there about the B-29. Um, okay, so this is super weird, but another thing we don't really talk about. Japan had this crazy idea. They're like, what if we take a bunch of bombs and strap like time release weather balloons to them and just kind of float them over to America? And they did it, and a ton of balloons come over and land, and most of them are like a bunch of them, of course, don't make it, but then a bunch, they're landing on the western half of North America. It's not super populated, but I mean they do some damage. Um, but isn't that crazy? I'm like, oh, I never heard about any of that. But I'm not gonna. I won't have a question. I won't have a question about that on there. Um, the birth of the computer. I probably need to like make a more concrete pointing out of that. Um, yeah, this is just a lot on like bombs and the computer. Um, more on the details and outflow of the war. Oh, I don't know why this is like this. This should definitely be red. Of course, Normandy, right? The beaches of Normandy, France, are like another major turning point in the liberation of Europe from the Nazis. Oh, this is pretty interesting. It's D-Day from the German perspective, like what it would be like to be a German and experience D-Day. Terrifying. Um, I think this might be worth watching. It's probably like he's super long-winded. Oh no, okay,
So
this is just 6 minutes. So watch this. Jordan Peterson's like fantastic. He's brilliant. I really appreciate him. This is just the thing on like worldviews, which is kind of like a huge part of what we're talking about, right? Like worldviews, not just for us in America as Americans, but worldviews that like gave rise to the Nazis, or maybe as we're seeing right now, like, oh, we're having very different worldviews, just about like our current society in America. I wrote a little thing here on the Man in the High Castle, which I again, a few of you guys have seen. It's so fantastic. It's great. Um, this is important, and this is in what's his name? Oliver Stone does a really great job highlighting this in his Netflix thing, the documentary of the or untold history of the United States. It's about the kind of the like ousting of the vice president and inserting the Harry Truman, who will become president. Um, this one, the GI Bill, which we're going to talk about a little bit more, but in our, after our break, when we come back and talk about the Cold War and the 50s, this is a significant thing. This is a significant part of American history in general, in terms of how it's uh, uh, like just shapes America and opportunities for Americans. So originally, it was actually meant much better. It was a complete economic bill of rights, but like most things, it gets whittled down. Still benefits, I don't know, 8, 9 million American Americans right after the war, but also like many more for the future. Um, Maybe let me change this to red too. Brenton Woods is kind of the reorganizing of the world system. This is when the world's going to start operating off of the dollar. Um, yeah, this is also the birth of neoconservatism, which Noah might have some things to say about that later. The forming of the UN, um, FDR getting reelected. Those are huge major things. This is just more on like the details and depths of the war. Um, Read this, like be familiar with this. You need to know about Anne Frank and who she is. And then if you haven't noticed, I keep throwing in some quotes from this man who was he's a general in the Nazi army, and actually very enthusiastic about Hitler up until a point. Then he takes part in a plot to get rid of him, to kill him, and is like horrified at what they'd become. Be familiar with the idea that the Holocaust denial is a real thing. And then when we come to 1945, you should be familiar enough with just the flow of the war and where a couple of the big major things are, like Stalingrad and D-Day. Um, uh, you should be familiar enough with that flow that it is not hard to realize that by 1945, like, oh, Germany definitely knows they're going to lose, like everybody does. Hitler does. Like it's just a matter of time at this point. But the war wages on. The Yalta Conference is another one of these like monumental events that's going to shape the post-war world, but it's the last one that the three of these guys are going to be at. Um, that this classic, raising the flag at Iwo Jima, it can, be that's an iconic moment in American history.
That's like
The invasion of
patriotism
Pearl
right
Harbor.
there.
Yeah.
I can use it.
What's that?
Can I use that?
Which one?
The right there raising the flag.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's
absolutely. This is what I mean by like,
Professor.
yeah, if you find a great thing in here that's like, oh, that's good. And it's not really like anybody could use that to talk about, World War II. It might not fit with everybody's, but yeah, if that's for working with you, yeah, grab that.
Professor,
Yes.
I have one question about World War II. It's kind of a nerdy one, but it's one I've been wondering. What if the Nazis, their Operation Sea Lion, what if it succeeded and it conquered Britain? Because Britain had a lot of colonies, and they also had the British Navy, which Germany could not match. So even if they had invaded the British mainland, would the British army still have kept on fighting?
Uh that's a good question. I think so.
Because
And
if I was a British
like,
officer, unless like I was just like I want to go home, I would be like, let's keep on fighting. We could be like a little like a terrorist group against the Germans. At least we can keep up the blockade. We can. I mean,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, I think that would happen. And like the British resolve, the resolve they showed was pretty stiff. And Winston Churchill is a very controversial figure in history, and people kind of love him or hate him. I mean, he's a mixed bag. But one thing is for sure: if Franklin Roosevelt and said like, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself," and then and that relieved people about the Great Depression. When Churchill takes power and he says, look, we'll fight on the beaches, we'll fight in the streets, we'll fight in the fields, like this will be our finest hour. It's like, damn, dude, that guy stepped it up to the plate. Like he really did. And I think he actually gave the British people even more resolve. So I think they would have continued to fight. However, like England's never invaded, right? Like they don't
Yeah.
really know. Like they just,
At the very least, when I think America and other powers would have helped the British like the British Navy stay intact. Like here, you just hold the line, and we'll reinforce you. That type of thing.
yeah, yeah. And like the French underground resistance is essentially that. It's um, it's um what is left of the French army and the French kind of leadership. It's whatever's left for them. That left of them, that is who is like running into the bushes now and like basically sabotaging the Germans, just like you said, like just kind of running a resistance movement, saying like, no, 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 I don't think so. We're we're not gonna roll over that easily, my friend. We're gonna keep this going.
Thank you.
Yeah, you got it, man. Okay. Let me see here. Let me see here. Sorry, I'm just resetting something. All right. Okay. So it's April 1945. The The Russians have gotten to Berlin. America's they're trying to get there quickly. It's kind of to the victor goes the spoils. And Berlin's like the center, it's the epicenter of everything for the last 15 years. Maybe last 25 or 30 years actually. So Hitler, Harry Truman dies basically the day that Berlin is invaded. Not Harry Truman, I'm sorry, Franklin Roosevelt dies. And Harry Truman all of a sudden becomes the leader of America. And most people really don't even know who he is, at all. Um, Hitler dies shortly after that. So as the Soviets are coming into Berlin, they're nearing his bunker and he commits suicide. And there's a lot of like, did he do this? Did he escape to South America? Did this or that? Yeah, like he did not. He died. He did not leave Berlin. There's footage of him like days before this happens, looking very old, his hands shaking from pretty much people are pretty convinced he had Parkinson's. Um, that was like aggravated at the end of his life. But basically pinning medals on like 13, 14-year-old boys that have guns, like the last people they can find in Berlin to fight against the Russians. And so shortly thereafter, Germany finally surrenders. It's about a week of kind of chaos. Yeah, and so as the war is wrapping up in Europe now, Germany's depleted and they're kind of just in shambles. But one of the things, Hitler being a just crazy son of a bitch, issued the Nero decree. It's Nero, the Roman emperor, who set fire to Rome and then like played his fiddle while it burned and blamed Christians for doing it so he could kill them. Like that guy. Yeah, like he named a plan after him. And it was to go like scorched earth, like, hey, all of the artwork we've stolen from everywhere, all of the like, historical documents, etc., like burn everything. And so a few years ago, a movie came out that I actually really liked. It was called The Monuments Men. John Goodman.
Oh, I've heard about
Yeah,
that.
did you see that?
I didn't get to see that. I know it was like I think also up for an Academy.
Yeah, I think it was. Matt Damon's in it, Bill Murray. Like it's really enjoyable. I really like that film. And it's about the real life underground work that's begun before the war's over to try to like save certain pieces of art and find hidden things. So, yeah, I'll probably have just a question about that. But read through that. Oil and the war again. Highlight oil and the war. Oil and the war. Here's an important quote that I leave you with on the kind of death of Hitler and maybe the defeat of other villains in history. Don't rejoice in his defeat, you men, for though the world stood up and stopped the bastard, the bitch that bore him is in heat again. Is a German playwright who was exiled during the Nazi government, and basically just saying, yeah, you can beat Hitler, but until you conquer like nationalism and racism and arrogance and greed and all these other things,
Hey, sir.
you can have another Hitler pop up again.
Carl Jung once said that you could throw Mother Nature out with a pitchfork, but she'll find a way to come back in again.
Wait, what was that?
Jung. Jung said that you can throw nature out with a pitchfork, but she'll always find a way to come back in again.
That's good. That's a good quote. Yeah. Yeah. It's like, well, this is the nature of the machine. And this is kind of the nature of like capitalist or imperialist or colonialist uh, societies. They'll keep, producing that. So two major things happen as the war ends, as America comes through, the lowlands and in through like Western Germany. Russia has been coming through East Europe and Poland and into East Germany. And when after the Allies make camp in, on the beaches of France and begin pushing into kind of the heart of Germany towards Berlin, they um, they discover start discovering camps, and they have heard reports from them for a while now. Escaped people, spies. The Russians have been telling, because the Russians found them a lot earlier because they were in like Poland, you know, before America was in Germany. So they're both uncovering this, and again, like we know in retrospect how big and horrible this is. And we can kind of have some idea of trying to wrap our mind around that. But they didn't know, even somebody uncovering one or two concentration camps or a death camp, they don't know that there's like literally hundreds of these and that millions of people, like, they begin figuring it out though, and it's overwhelming to humanity. I mean, that's an incredibly uncomfortable picture, but it's supposed to be. This is like the end of kind of technology as something that's going to save humanity. We realize we can just as easily um, you know hurt with it as we can help and heal. Maybe easier to do that. This is so here's some stuff on some of these, the worst of the worst camps out in like Poland, Buchenwald and Auschwitz. It's there in Poland. I went to Auschwitz about, well, it's 15 years ago now. Um, it's along with its neighbor is like the biggest of all the death camps, and uh just being there, felt like I kind of lost track of time. I think it was most of the day. I went by myself. It was totally overwhelming, and very, very, very undeniable. So, anybody that is like a Holocaust denier, tell them if they really believe that, and the whole world's just this is this big of a conspiracy. Like, well, spend a few $100 and fly to Europe and go look at some stuff. Like that's the quickest way to like connect the reality of something like this to what we're thinking, what's really going on in our heads. Um, so as these things are being, um, uncovered and news of them starts to spread, by the like end of this year, this is one of the most watched like events of the entire war. It's one of the first things that's going to get any kind of like broadcasting, like, or close to that. um it's the Nuremberg trials. In the following year, they make a fantastic movie called The Nuremberg Trials, which is about one of the American judge at these trials. And this is the first time that anybody's even used the term crimes against humanity. That was not a thing before this moment. There was no such thing. Um, there really wasn't such a thing as genocide, not in any kind of modern sense at all. So there's new language for all of this. And then having the trials, they present evidence, and the the Nazis and the Nazi collaborators who were responsible for this, the ones that didn't kill themselves, because most of them did, most of them killed themselves or took cyanide. Some of them escaped to South America. Some of these guys definitely did. So that's one of the reasons it fuels those speculations about Hitler. the world sees this. The world sees what's going to happen, like what has happened. They see evidence. They'll be presented like pictures and
Pictures and
statistics and
and
artifacts from the camps. Um, it's such a huge event, and it's so awful, and it's really hard to even imagine like millions and millions of people being dead. Hard to imagine that in a war, period. But this way, it's hard for us to wrap our mind around it. And I think that's probably one of the reasons behind wanting to deny it or shut that off. So the other thing that we get hit with at the end of the war is a new thing called atomic anxiety. So, oh, here I'm going to mute you, Marshawn. Oh, there you go. So the Manhattan Project, this secret plan to build a atomic bomb, goes back several years. You saw that earlier on, and the the thing that happens in that moment is so secretive. They employ like, I want to say 20,000, but it's probably more like 2,000. No, it might be 20,000 people. It is a lot of people. They basically build some stuff, a little city out in New Mexico as well to do this. And it's so secretive that Harry Truman, the vice president, didn't even know about it until after FDR dies. So here is a relatively inexperienced, not super sharp politician from Iowa who doesn't even have a college degree is just handed the first atomic bomb in the world. This is why that VP shakeup in 1944 is maybe so expensive or so important, because that change, puts him in charge of the bomb, not Franklin Roosevelt, and not Henry Wallace. And so at Trinity, New Mexico, this is where you know uh, uh, a change in human history occurs, because we create the first like large nuclear chain reaction. And then the next day, so I want you to see the timing here. July 6th. The next day is the Potsdam Conference, which has Joseph Stalin, but FDR is gone and Truman's here, and Churchill's gone, and what's his name? Oh, I need to update that. It says Churchill. I'll cross that out. I'll go back and fix that. It's not Churchill, though. He gets elected out. They have the conference the next day. It got postponed for like a week and a half, and they were postponing it on purpose because what was supposed to happen at the end of the war, America and Britain dragged their feet in terms of a land invasion in Europe, to make Hitler fight a two fronts war. The Soviets were dying and we were taking our time. Um, the Hitler was the priority. Like, America agreed to that at the outset of the war. But once Hitler was done and dealt with, Russia would turn, their attention to Japan, because they're also enemies. And they committed 1 million men to that, that were going to happen, which not only means we would have to have a total coalition victory in Europe, the way, America, the British, the Soviets were like moving in together, defeating Hitler together. That's not true in Japan. The Soviets are not fighting at all in Japan because Well, they're battling for their lives against Hitler, and so are the British. So we're left alone in the Pacific, and a lot of the fiercest fighting happens in the Pacific on the islands. Um, Many people are get lost at sea, or shot down, um, over the waters out there. We had climbed up close enough to Japan, Okinawa, to where we could do bombing runs, regular bombing runs against Japan. And we're preparing for like a land invasion that, if the million Soviets joined as well, would be pretty powerful. But it will also mean that we would have to share Japan with the Soviet Union, who's right next to it, as well as Germany. We're kind of far away from both of those places, as well as all the stuff that Japan controls all up and down the Pacific coast, like all of that stuff. We'd have to partner with them and kind of govern this world, situation together afterwards. Well, we don't want to do that. And we don't have to if we get a bomb. And the reason we developed this, the reason the Manhattan Project was started in the first place was, um, some of the scientists fleeing Europe knew what Heisenberg and the Nazis and some of these people were up to, trying to make a Heisenberg device, trying to make a nuclear bomb that they could use. I mean, they got pretty dang close. They may have been able to do a couple of very small, um, detonations, very small, and that was their problem. They probably couldn't get their hands on the nuclear material needed to really make a bomb of that size, because they were losing the war and their territory was shrinking. Uh, so we had been funding this like nuts to make this happen. The best, brightest people anywhere in the country, they could get to work on this. Um, we did no longer need it for Germany, but Japan was still at war with us. And so detonating the Trinity test and then starting the Potsdam Conference means that America is in the driver's seat and everybody else is in the back seats. There's no co-pilot, there's no co-captain. America's going to have the the lion's share of everything. This is and here's like a very original, the original black and white footage from, up in an airplane. Um, we use this new technology, perhaps something that could like significantly change the course of human history. We use it like against people twice, and we did not have to. Categorically didn't have to. Um, I can't judge people retrospectively in history. I'm just saying we definitely could have invaded Japan, and they were very weak by the time you get to the middle of 1945, especially after the defeat of Germany. So the bomb does bring this victory about swiftly, right? But there's a hidden blowback in that. There's a hidden problem that when you take over a territory and have pushed the conquering enemy out and reclaimed it, you have swept the whole place of, their presence and power and established your own. And then you keep moving forward. When you island hop, that doesn't necessarily happen. When you island hop and then just drop two big ass bombs that end the war, like with no conditions, like unconditional surrender instantly, it creates huge power vacuums that get filled by different local factions, different political leaders, different competing camps, right? And so like communists and capitalist camps start to grow in different parts of
Parts of
Japan's
Japan's former.
former empire.
Can I have a question?
Sure.
As it relates to today, because I guess I was having a conversation with a couple like friends who are also history people. history buffs, and I was asking them about what's going on now about Trump like taking the troops out of Iran, and so is that like dang, where's my question? Like how you're saying if we just island hop or we like um oh man, what you're just saying like leave it alone to them, they can it can grow like more terrorism, is that I'm trying to
Yeah.
figure out if I'm
Yeah,
going.
exactly. Like it that is what created that's what created ISIS. It was like, okay, the war in
Mhm.
Iraq's over. You guys everything's solved, right? No, you're a hot mess. It's cool. We'll leave all this shit here that we paid hundreds of billions of dollars for, all these weapons and stuff. And your government, you don't really have a government? Oh, you do? Okay. Oh, all these crazy people grabbed everything, and now they've got a lot of weapons, and they're in
Mhm.
charge or in charge of part of the place. Like, uh-oh, yeah, it created a power vacuum. Um, I mean, we don't have troops in Iran, right? Like, but like, are you talking about around Iran?
Yeah, because what I'm trying to. I was what you're just saying right now. I was trying to like correlate to like what's going on today about what has been going on and recently, and about what was it? Oh God, like Iran. Yeah, it's Iran
Iran.
because he's trying to like take like get the troops from like leave, and like Mitch McConnell is basically against that and he's been supportive of Trump this whole time, but
That's
when
weird.
it comes, yeah, that's what he was like, he was against it cuz
That's the thing to
um
take a stand against Trump on.
yeah, yeah, 'cause like when I was listening to and what I was like reading, it seems like he wants to bomb Iran, but there's no rational reason for why he wants to. And so that's why I'm asking like
Oh,
you now if you can clarify a little bit on that.
I mean, I know everybody thinks I've been maybe a little overly fearful. Like I think Trump's gonna do crazy shit.
Mhm.
You know, if he starts a war with Iran, like
Mhm.
like a real war, like starts lobbing missiles in there and they're firing back, and
Mhm.
he's got a very good, reason to say you need to like delay the inauguration. Like we're in a state of emergency, like I'm gonna I'm gonna take emergency power control of the Galactic Senate. like
Yeah,
I
that's what I
promise I'll
was.
give it back.
People, other ones were telling me that as well. Like it just can delay, or especially when we're in the middle of like, I mean, we've already know who the president elect is, but that could definitely destabilize us in some type of way. That's what I was. I forgot what my question was, but I understand like what you were saying, just like about what you were just talking about right
Like
now.
about the
Sorry
power
about that.
vacuums and stuff.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah, which is, like that's a really I'm glad that, and I'm glad we paused on that, because it really is a very important thing. It's like, oh, this is one of the biggest reasons the Cold War happens, because there's all these places that are like half and half, or
Mhm.
places like in Korea where like mm, the Russians, like they might be helping the Korean resistance against Japan, which would be up in the north. And when America lands, and we get into Korea, uh, it's from the south, and then of course the division happens between north and south, communist and capitalist. It's kind of the same thing happens in Vietnam, um, in various different
Hey,
places. And
sir,
then the fear is like,
that's
well,
false.
if one of these places falls to communism, it means all the other nations in the region will start to do that too, and they can't get more powerful. So we've got to stop them spreading anywhere we can, even places where it was like, oh, the Soviets weren't like spreading communism there. Like those people just had elections and elected like a communist politician who was around before the war was even going on, but oh well, we got to assassinate him. He might lead us to nuclear war with the Russians. So yeah, that power vacuum, the colonialism in the first place, right? Of course, is the reason for the Cold War. But then the power vacuum created by like the displacement and reorganization of colonialism and the world economy, and then America having the biggest guns, always. We've had the biggest guns since the 1940s. Um, that is setting us up for what's going to happen in the Cold War and the change in leadership, even in Britain and the U.S. They really don't trust Joseph Stalin and haven't worked with him, and it's just going to divide from here. Um, I put this picture and maybe a couple more down in here of like, um, this is the signing of the treaty. Like, this is an American battleship. Look at how big that gun is. That's a little person right there. Like, that could probably shoot you out of it.
Wow.
And look at how many American servicemen in uniform are here. And there's Emperor Hirohito and like a couple of his like a few of his entourage. I don't know why these
So would that
pictures.
be like patriotism or nationalism?
Well, right here, I think it's like, okay, this is actually just how it works. It's like, all right, well, you guys are going to give up. Yeah, we will. All right, well, get your little God man out here and sign the damn paper. Like, because people still thought that, Hirohito was like divine. Like the Japanese people largely thought like, no, no, he's divine. Like he's different. He's not a regular human. And so Zoom didn't work. Just him speaking on the radio to announce that Japan was surrendering, I think is the first time like the Japanese people, Japanese population had ever heard the voice of their emperor. It was divine, let alone being pictured in something, let alone being shipped out to is it the USS Missouri? Is that the ship that's out there in Tokyo Bay? Yeah, the Missouri. Um, this is a massive, massive battleship, right? And there are thousands of soldiers and sailors just sitting around because this is not the only battleship. There's like an armada in front of Japan right now, and this is in Tokyo Bay. Like everybody in Japan can see kind of what's going on, to a degree. They can see the emperor leaving to go out here. This would just be a terrifying moment to be in. Like if you were one of those people, right? If you're one of the Japanese, I mean, what a terrifying moment. And then to go, you got to go get on the boat and go sign the damn paper, right? And General MacArthur is there to like, oversee it. And he's like he's probably like the top 3 or 4 person in the whole military, maybe at this point. Um, so I don't know that it's nationalism or patriotism or anything
Mm-hmm.
outside of just like, well, how else do you do this? Like, it's not like they could have a Zoom meeting. It's not like he could get faxed a document. They didn't have like you know, international organizations to deal with something like this. Like the emperor had to tell the Japanese people, this is not a coup. This is not nobody's trying to fool you. We're actually surrendering. And then go out on the boat and sign the papers. Like that's a that's I mean, you see a picture and you're like, oh yeah, it was World War II. It's like, no, 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 that really happened. Like, imagine that happening. Imagine being on that boat. Be you
Mm-hmm.
American or Japanese, either way, that's a tense moment. Like, if you're on that boat, you definitely know people who have died, who the Japanese have killed, and here's their, deity leader who let the military run the country and wage this horrible war. So, and then and then and like your friends are dead because of it, and now you're seeing that guy and you're feet away from him, and it's a surreal moment. It's a little crazy to think of, and so here's his address. Um, Yeah, the cost of the war. Probably don't have time to get into that, but the deaths of the war. If you look at World War One, these are conservative numbers, right? Maybe 6 million civilian deaths. Huge number, crazy higher than traditional warfare. 10 million military deaths. World War II had 50 million civilian deaths and 21 million military deaths. The military deaths were like double, but the civilian deaths were astronomically high. Insane levels. Insane levels. And so here you can see a breakdown of the countries that lose the most. And the Soviet Union is way up at the top. Way up at the top. Here it is in some graphs where you can see kind of just in comparison to who loses who. The Soviet Union loses the most. China is a close second to Germany, and most people don't realize that the war in China was just atrocious. Very small numbers compared to the British and US. I mean, that's close to a million there, with these groups. These are military deaths though. And here's World War One by military deaths. Again, Germany and Russia having a huge proportion there. This I'm just gonna play and show you via Zoom.
The average lifespan of an American is 80 years. And an 80-year-old today was 10 when World War II began, or when it began. A soldier who saw battle would have to be in his late 80s at least today. Generals, political leaders, the decision makers of the war, few are still with us. And over the past few decades, we've seen authors and filmmakers rush to capture stories from survivors